Thank you for joining us on The Burning Question. As two big American banks shut down, and as a result of that, as tremors are felt in global stock markets, as over $465 billion are wiped out as per conservative estimates as a fallout of the banking crisis in America, there are some big questions, especially around those who relied on these American analysts, American experts, American reports to question India. Where is Hindenburg tonight? That's the burning question.
America is facing the biggest banking crisis. Two US-based banks have collapsed in a matter of just about 48 hours. After Silicon Valley, Signature Capital shut shop. Silicon Valley Bank customers waited in line to withdraw their money. This comes after the federal government stepped in to guarantee deposits following the bank collapse.
We were panicking. I think a lot of us were panicking, and we're trying to get through in terms of how we open up different bank accounts quickly, and more so in terms of how we can, whether we'll get our cash back or, whatever money we are left with on the bank side.
Depositors withdrew savings and investors broadly sold off bank shares. President Joe Biden insisted that the system was safe after the second and third largest bank failures in the nation's history happened in the span of 48 hours. In response to the crisis, regulators guaranteed all deposits at the two banks. They created a program that effectively threw a lifeline to the other banks to shield them from a run on deposits.
It was quite nerve-wracking because all our money is primarily banked here, and being one of the largest banks in Silicon Valley, 15th largest in the US overall, I think nobody had thought that it should happen, and that in the manner in which it happened is.
New York bank regulators took possession of Signature Bank, ousting its leaders and handing day-to-day control over to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp. Agency report, Republic TV.
Joining us on The Burning Question this evening, Shazia Almi, National Spokesperson of the BJP, P.K. Nambiar, Political Analyst, Satyakumar, Lawyer, Economist, Dr. Amirullah Khan, Economist, Research Director, Center for Development, Policy and Practice, and Dr. Suman Siraman, Political Analyst. And I'm starting with P.K. Nambiar. Let me start with you, PKD. PKD, you see, after Lehman, they said that, markets will collapse around the world. They said India will almost be finished. You remember in 2008? After Demo, they said that Indian markets will collapse. After Adani, they said Indian markets would collapse. Before that, they said, after COVID, they said India was almost over. But the irony this evening is, as we discuss this, it's the American banking system that has collapsed because of its own making.
I think you said it actually. The way there is a section of people in our country, they wanted to celebrate the collapse of India. They have been waiting for our system to collapse, whether it is our economic, the banking sector or our insurance sector, or for that matter, our health sector. They have some kind of pain if they are not seeing us collapsing. But despite the fact that they eat, drink, sleep, and live here in this very own land. I think the hypocrisy of those people, just about 10-15 days back also, who was talking about the Adani collapse, and Adani means India, Adani means Modi, and the India is going to be over, the Indian stock market is all over, India is collapsed, India's airports, the 5 odd airports which the Adanis are controlling is not going to, the people will not be able to take flight anymore there. The people who will not be able to use the ports which are controlled by Adani. My dear friends, today, what are you going to, the examples what you guys take every day, morning and day out, is the American success story. Tell me, what is that Silicon Valley Bank collapse means to all of us? When are we going to learn to experience and proud of our success rather than just making a mockery of us and criticizing us, our own country, without even having a very basic basis? I think the hypocrisy of our Indian left-oriented media or some of the opposition parties, I won't call it like all of them, but I think this is out and open. I haven't heard any of the media channels are discussing in such a very passionate way the way the Silicon Valley Bank, which has collapsed. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I know that when a bank collapses, what it means to a large number of corporate houses or the business houses who do business with these kind of a bank. But today you can't hear much voices in at least the Indian left, the liberal media, so-called.
You know, the irony is, I don't know whether all of you saw that report we played out in closely, right? You know who's the worst affected? If you heard the sound bites, they're the Indian entrepreneurs in America who are stuck. And you know the irony, most of them, some in India, have gone to the government asking the Indian government to somehow try and help them, and India is trying to help out our community and our startups which have their money ironically stuck in American banks. Now those who question the Indian banking system, I think we'll have to reflect this evening on how resilient we actually are. Dr. Amirullah Khan, for those who are saying there are gaps in the Indian banking system, I think the Indian banking system is more resilient than ever tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Niranjan. You know, the conservative nature of our banking is something that has saved us time and again. You will all remember that when we opened up the banking sector in the early 90s, there was a similar issue, and there were a lot of people who were pushing us into capital account convertibility very fast, and the bank played a conservative role, the federal bank. And therefore, the East Asian crisis that happened in the late 1990s did not really impact India as much as it should have. Similarly, the 2008 crisis, because we were looking at a very conservative regulatory system. That is the same system that is holding the regulatory system in its place. However, one must understand that what is happening in the United States, it's not really a national issue. No, it's not really India versus America. We'll be making the same mistake again if we make it, a country issue. The same thing that we talk about where, we say that Indians were paying after Adani and so on. It's not that case. This is a simple case of a bank run. And it is a case where the banks were caught napping because they didn't understand what was going on with interest rates going up.
I disagree.
Can I disagree with you, Dr. Amirullah Khan?
I want to come in.
Okay,
I disagree.
Give him 30 seconds more. Give him 30 seconds more, Shazia.
I don't think there is any.
I want to come in. 30 seconds.
I want to come in, sir. I totally disagree with you, sir.
Give him 30 seconds.
There were issues raised when Hindenburg tried to be very smart, the short seller, and tried to talk about Adani, and obviously it failed to look at its own shore, and that is another matter. But it did raise questions about the regulatory bodies in India and about the Indian banking system, and there were questions asked about the efficacy and the maturity of the regulatory bodies of India and how work is done. So that definitely is and would be examined. So in that sense, there is no false equivalence that is being attributed to right now. That is something to be looked at. There is something prudent, something solid about our banking institutions. And yes, also for the Indian techs out there and investors, they would have been better off investing in Indian banks than in banks like Silicon Valley and others which are going bust. And yes, I also wish, and no wonder Hindenburg is being trolled right now. I mean, couldn't they detect a scam happening right in their own premises within the boundaries of the US? So that would be the questions that would be asked, and about how the regulatory bodies have been caught napping totally, and such a huge banking crisis is at large in the US.
Yeah, I want to say something before I know Sumant wants to come in. I'll bring in Sumant and Satya. Sumant, you know what has happened that went almost unreported by most of the media, even in America? The CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, the CFO of Silicon Valley Bank, just 1 week before the bank went bust, They dumped their shares, they sold their shares. There was so much going on that nobody noticed, right? And today the Federal Reserve, all the Americans, including, the irony is, you're very active on Twitter, Sumant. You go and check those people who are asking for a bailout from the American government from this crisis are the same set of dudes.
Yes, Bill Ackman.
No, 1 minute. Are the same set of dudes who are criticizing the government, left, right, center, the Indian government and our regulatory system. And I have some breaking news right now. As we speak, the Federal Reserve has said in America that they will have to review its supervision of Silicon Valley Bank. They're talking about everything that's gone wrong and what they will have to now do to set it right. Now, my question to you is,
Niranjan.
yeah, Satya, I want someone to come in and you can respond to him. Now, my question to you is,
Bill Ackman is one of the principal investors.
and my question is to Suman. My question is to Suman. See, Suman, they spoke of Indian banking system, but the irony is it's the US banking system that has collapsed, Sumant. And no one's talking about it.
First of all, Niranjan, I think it's juvenile to say the US banking system has collapsed because Silicon Valley Bank collapsed along with one more bank. Now, let's be very clear. The size of the American economy is $23 trillion. The size of the Indian economy is not even $4 trillion. So we have to keep things in perspective. Even if 10 Silicon Valley banks fail in the United States, there's still going to be a multiple times bigger
and you will
economy
keep
than
on bashing
we are.
India.
One. Can I finish? I didn't interrupt you. Quiet. I didn't interrupt you. Now, the difference between the Adani issue and this is what happens next. There are frauds, there are collapses which happen in every part of the world. The difference between our regulators is that they were told, formal complaints were given, and still nothing was done. There is a difference between what happened in the Silicon Valley Bank case. Silicon Valley Bank, the only evidence of any kind of hanky-panky is the sale of shares by the CEO and CFO a week before. There are no allegations of insider trading. There are no allegations of money laundering. There are no allegations of shell companies routing billions of dollars.
Yeah, mismanagement, absolutely.
Buy their shares. No, one second. Let me finish. Now the point is, it is very likely. 1 second, sir. 1 second.
Okay, Satya, give him 30 seconds. Satya, give him 30 seconds.
My turn.
Satya, give him 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
The difference is, if there is a fraud, these promoters of Silicon Valley Bank and the officials will go to jail. In India, nothing will happen. And that is the problem. The problem is not about fraud. Frauds happen everywhere. Frauds happen everywhere. Banks collapse everywhere. But the
banks collapse everywhere.
What the Fed, banks collapse everywhere. Banks collapse everywhere, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, on this point, on one point, can I hold you? Okay, so Satya, wait.
Parts of the world.
Okay, on this point, only on this point, we'll pause.
In India also,
Satya,
we had PMC cooperative banks collapse.
Okay, Satya,
we had
just one
government bailouts for multiple banks, multiple times.
Okay, hold on. We'll take it one point at a time. Suman, I'm coming to your point. I'm pointing at what you said. First of all, you said it would be juvenile. You started by saying it would be juvenile. You tell me, as of this evening, by conservative estimates, nearly $500 billion in global markets has been wiped out as a result of this bank collapse, Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and whatever was happening in the US, right? Is it juvenile for us to even discuss a fallout of? Is it juvenile that so much of in India?
$100 billion of one group's wealth was wiped out in 3 weeks. I don't remember us doing a show.
No, we've done. We've done. Suman, you know we've done. No, Suman, you know we've done.
No. My point is very simple.
No, we've done. $465 billion wipeout is a juvenile thing, and I don't know. Satya's coming in.
2019-20 onwards, Bahua Maitra has raised formal complaints with SEBI.
Okay.
No
Satya's saying something. Okay, one sec. Satya, your turn. Yeah.
I have done, Niranjan, my past professional experience, I have done due diligence of many US banks subsidiary in India. Legal due diligence. I can tell you there is a Basel norm, there is a Sarbanes-Oxley Act, there is a stringent rules in US, but unfortunately, this shows if the bank is collapsing, there is a fraud that has happened. Hindenburg doesn't have backbone. Hindenburg is selective. It has a selective agenda to collapse Indian economy. Whereas when it comes to SVB, we have people like Suman, who are very learned person, saying it is juvenile. It is a joke. He is making a joke out of a bank. Is there a rule in everywhere the bank collapses? Have you seen in India a bank collapsing? Even in the case of GTP, Global Trust Bank, Indian government went on to save that bank. Here is a federal in US, we don't know what is
taxpayers picked up the tab. Taxpayers picked up the tab for fraudulent decisions of people. The Indian taxpayer was made a sucker.
They are now running
Sorry,
short of working capital.
the Indian taxpayer was made a sucker as the government bailed out these banks. How many banks have been bailed out by government? If the government had not bailed out these banks, so many of them would have collapsed.
Please allow me to speak. Suman, please allow me to speak. I allowed you to speak. Suman, there is a SLR requirement. You should be aware of it. Statutory liquidation in India. There is always a conservative approach that the Reserve Bank of India has taken. Whereas in case of Silicon Valley Bank, today many of our entrepreneurs have parked their money, ODIs, in Silicon Valley banks. They have their working capital needs relied on Silicon Valley Bank. How can a US, which has a stringent regulation, allow a bank to fail? That means it is a fraud that has happened in the SVB
just
bank.
one more thing, Satya, today,
yes, sir.
Until this morning, Nambiar, you were wrong, PKD, you were wrong in the beginning in your opening comment when you said until recently the opposition was talking about Adani. What are you talking about, PKD? Even today they're talking about Adani. They stalled the house over Adani. I would have expected the opposition. I would have expected the opposition. No, PKD. I would have expected the opposition. Satya, hear me out. I would have expected the opposition. No, 1 minute. Hear my question. I'm saying I would have expected. 1 minute. That's not the point. Hear my question. Suman, hear my question. None of you want to hear my question. I'm saying. You haven't heard my question, Suman.
And those billions are invested in.
1 minute, Sumant. I'm saying, Sumant, hear my question. I'm asking.
Logical explanation for that.
No, Sumant.
I'm not able to understand.
Okay, Sumant, give me 10 seconds. I'll complete my question and tell me. Okay, tell me. Okay, I'll bring PKD. And Sumant. 1 minute. Tell me something. 1 minute, Shazia. I'm saying.
She's going to tell us the reason
1 minute.
So many companies are in the same address.
India baiters and India haters. It is.
Ma'am, none of you are willing to ask. Okay, I'm just going to put your audio down for a second. I'm going to put your audio down for a second. I'm going to put all your audio. I'm putting the audio fader down for a second only because I want to complete my question. Okay, all your audio faders are down. I'm asking my question. I'm saying if today the opposition is still raising Adani, instead, why don't you come in, Dr. Amirullah Khan? Do you think the opposition would be constructive if they come forward and talk about how a lot of Indian startups' monies are stuck and how we can step forward and help them in this hour of crisis? There are so many Indian startups and all of them are having panic meetings in Delhi, we are told, with the ministries to ask India to step forward and help. Do you think there should be a conversation around that? Dr. Amirullah Khan.
Yeah, thanks, Niranjan. This is the important issue, and we are really missing the trees for the woods because we are concentrating on Hindenburg. That's irrelevant to this whole exercise. The point is that there is a bank run that is happening in the US. It has affected these three big banks, and it has affected a few of Indian startups which have parked their money there or borrowed from there. They are going to get hurt because interest rates are very high. They've made mistakes by continuing to keep their accounts there, despite knowing that the US government is easing interest rates and continuously doing that because of very high inflation. We are unnecessarily making it a nationalist issue. It is not. It's just a question of poor banking. The US opposition did not raise the issue when Nirav Modi ran away with money or when Indian banks were defrauded, and we could do very little about that. That is not for the US opposition to talk about. Indian banks going bust is not a US issue. Likewise, US banks going bust is not an issue for India's parliament to take up. India's parliament is going to ask India's government what it is going to do with Adani and all the allegations that have been laid by various people in India, not Hindenburg. That is the issue. The issue is that we need to ensure that we do a fair investigation. Adani might very well
But that's still on.
be fine.
That's all, Doctor.
Yeah.
That
And
is
that
on.
what-
Even before the investigation is complete, I think we're jumping the gun on that one. The investigation is
That we are good at doing for everything.
No, but Supreme Court is ordered the panel away, Dr. Amirullah Khan. It's not like
Yes.
anybody can, just give it a pass or influence this investigation. That's not going to happen. Supreme Court is watching, isn't it? Okay, PKD wanted to come in.
It
PKD.
should.
Suman,
See,
I'm coming.
my problem is not that one bank collapsed in one part of the world. Okay, just let's assume for a minute that the logic of Suman C. Raman's like, okay, banks keep collapsing here and there. It should not matter to us. Okay, let's assume for a minute, just for the debate purpose, that one bank collapsed. How does it matter to us? Come on, man, that is not the way the world works. If at all anybody who understands the economics of anywhere in the world, somebody who had even learned a little bit of economics, we are in a world wherein it's a global economy, and Silicon Valley is the world's capital of IT capital. It is also the place where a large number of Indian startups are parked their money. They are relied on this particular bank. It will have ripple effect. That is what Niranjan was talking about. More than $450+ billion across the market, across the world have been wiped out only because of one bank or two banks collapse. Secondly, the people like you, Suman C. Raman, specifically to you, who criticize our SEBI or our regulators here is in a developed and the most looked after country like America, when none of the agencies and authorities not even aware about something which is happening. In one fine day morning, you get up and say that this bank has collapsed. And you are still trying to say that it's all is good in America because it is a 23 trillion economy and we are just a 4 trillion economy.
I'm giving him 30 seconds to respond. PKD, give him 30 seconds to respond. PKD, give him 30 seconds to respond.
Seriously, I definitely wanted to do a debate, a show.
Okay, give him 30 seconds to respond.
You will
Suman. Okay, Suman responding.
I'm amazed that those on the show do not know the difference between not knowing something and knowing that something is going wrong and doing nothing about it. There is a world of difference between the two. If the American regulators are found to have known and colluded with Silicon Valley Bank, look, complaints were given to SEBI 2020. Mahua Moitra,
and who are you, sir, to decide that some wrongdoing was done in India and no wrongdoing was done there?
Saying
Who are you, sir,
we are
exactly?
carrying out an
May
inquiry.
I ask you?
What happened to the inquiry?
May I ask you, Mr. Suman Raman, who exactly are you to decide as that and
I am not deciding. I am asking
1 minute.
any citizen of this country. Why are you getting so flustered, man?
Shazia, Suman, 1 minute.
Why are you getting so flustered?
We can speak. Okay, you don't have to speak over each other.
It's a simple
1 minute.
question.
We don't have to
Why
speak
is
over
she
each other.
getting so
We don't have to.
flustered?
Please don't speak over each other. Can I make a request?
So flustered, man.
Please don't speak over each other. Suman, 1 second. Suman, see 1 second. Suman, I'll tell you one thing. There is a big difference between self-inflicted trauma, like in the case of the Silicon Valley Bank, and external, premeditated, deliberate attack intended to harm an economy, like in the case of Hindenburg. Okay?
Correct.
And a country's democratically elected government, they try to attack India. Now,
absolutely.
today, no, 1 minute. Today, 1 minute. Today, even the American Fed Reserve is saying we were wrong, we messed up, we have to look at how we review our banks. And these were the same guys who were saying Indian system has collapsed, Indian banks have collapsed.
No. Hindenburg is a bad guy. Hindenburg is a crook. All of that fine. Now tell me about
I'm only saying, I think
who owns that? Who owns them? Who owns them? How does money come?
I would have
Forget it. Let's say Hindenburg is a wicked person. He's a crook.
Okay, I have to end it. I have to end this short debate at this point. But I'll just tell you, I would have expected. Okay, last 30 seconds, Satya. 30 seconds, Satya. And I'm ending it. Because
Hindenburg attack is on India. This SVB fall is failure of a bank. Please understand, it's a direct failure of a bank where US government is working on it. It is the Hindenburg is an attack on a market of India. We have washed $500 billion have got washed off from the global market. And please understand, we are looking upon for every regulation in US. When a bank is failing, that means the regulations have not taken care of the bank.
And I'll
It
make
can
one
never
last
happen
point.
in India.
And as I thank all our panelists, if you're wondering why there has been banking stocks are down, our markets are down, the only reason Indian stocks are going down is because Indian markets have roughly about 21 to 22% ownership in foreign hands. That's the only reason why our stocks are a little turbulent. But otherwise, our Indian banking system is resilient, and we will see this through as well. Thank you very much for joining us on The Burning Question.